Alright, I'm jumping the gun here. This is a video I was not going to make until I have time to do some more thorough inspection and measurements and give you guys some hard numbers, but I'll give you a little teaser here and I'll just give you my first impressions. So I bought a couple of these Speedmaster heads on Black Friday. I bought the hydraulic roller version. They have different versions depending on what spring you get. I will say that they look fairly clean, better than I expected by far for Speedmaster. The one thing I noticed on the Speedmaster is the finish on their casting. I want to call it a rough casting, but really, I mean, their finish is nice. And I've seen that before in a few areas. I've had some big block Chevy Speedmaster heads. I've got a Ford 302 outside with a whole Speedmaster top end kit. And the finish on their casting looks like they've at least got that part down. If nothing else, they've at least figured out how to make a nice casting. So this is the small block Mopar head, hydraulic roller springs, LA style, so it's got the shaft rockers. I'm not going to go through this whole thing because shit, everybody's doing this unboxing stuff. You know what a head looks like. But my first impressions are decent intake ports. They look like they have a generous bowl area. I will do a follow-up video where I measure the pinch and the port windows and you know, I go through this a lot better. But just doing a quick first impression, I just got them. I just literally pulled it out of the box right now. Decent coolant passages. They may be too big, so that may be something to look at. It's not just bigger is better, but make sure your gasket lines up because these look quite a bit different than the Edelbrock. So I'll show you. So here's my Edelbrock right here. Okay, you got a small little square port there, cover it with my thumb. And here's, you know, the difference in the Speedmaster. So, I mean, the more coolant flow is nice, but if your gasket doesn't line up or it doesn't match up well with your intake, then that's not going to help you any. So that's a point of concern, I guess, that I have right now. Plenty of thread for the intake bolts. Looks like that's about an inch deep on thread. I like that. The pinch isn't horrible. I like that. I like that this design that they went with here. I can sleeve this if I want to port through that pushrod pinch. I like that. They look like they're keepers. I believe these are 10 degree. The Edelbrocks are 7. Some of the lower line heads that you get are going to be a 7 degree keeper, and as you get into, you know, more spring pressure and better cams, you want a 10 degree. I believe these were advertised as 10 degrees, and it looks like they're machined to accept a lash cap if you run lash caps. That's just something I found interesting that I was not expecting. They're drilled for just the LA valve cover pattern. So you're stuck with that. They didn't dual drill it for a Magnum. They've got kind of a lump here that I really don't like. And here's something that looks nice, and I don't think it is. Their port window is huge. And that probably sounds great for flow, but if it's too big, I wouldn't think that that's going to line up with most headers. Go out and look at your small block headers you got laying around a garage, small block Mopar headers. You know, cover the port window with your thumb and then look at this port. So while a huge port is nice for airflow, that doesn't mean, you know, if it doesn't match up to your header, if your header sticks in here a 1/4 of an inch on all the sides, and now you've got that exhaust flow hitting your header flange that overhangs this, then that's not a very good idea. I'll come right back to that in a second with something else. Here's your chamber. I wouldn't say it's a copy of anything. It's not a copy of a Magnum chamber. If it is, it's a poor copy of a Magnum chamber. I don't think it's a direct ripoff of an Edelbrock LA head. I mean, they rip somebody off because that's what they do. You buy somebody's good R&D work and you reverse engineer it and you put it out there. But I haven't seen this particular chamber before, so I'm not sure where it comes from. Real rough, a lot of stuff to clean up here, otherwise you're just going to chip off jagged metal into your new engine. I think these are advertised as 202 160s, although that sure as hell doesn't look like a 160, but again, I'll get it apart and I'll put some calipers on it. That looks small to me. And lots of room here in between the valves. That's kind of a good thing, because if you wanted to run a bigger valve, that might not be a bad idea. It looks like you can go 208s possibly on this. Or if you were buying the heads bare and you know you're assembling the good quality valves and springs on your own, some people do, then you may be able to go with a bigger valve there, or that may leave you room to upsize this exhaust into something decent. Anyhow, that's that. Like I said, it doesn't mean shit until I get some calipers on it and can actually give you hard numbers on it. But there's a picture of the head. That should be your rocker arm feed hole right there. That should be your oil feed hole for your rockers. And what else am I noticing? There's a coolant passage there. There's a coolant passage. A couple of holes for steam or coolant flow. You know, so you don't get air pockets. Let's see. So they did some unshrouding here. You can see on the intake valve, so they put some effort into it. I'm not 100% against the chambers. I would like to see some more creative port work here to induce swirl, but I'm not 100% against the chambers. They're not completely horrible. Again, there's the intake. Oh yeah, and that brings me to the exhaust. So, they don't look bad. So, the other day when I was showing you the LA heads and the Magnum heads, I happened to reach over after I was done taking a video, that 302 Ford I have out there that's not mine. I happened to reach over. It's got a big port window for a small block Ford, a huge port window. I happened to stick my finger in, and that small block Ford head is the worst aluminum head I have ever put my hands on. I never paid attention till the other day. I stuck my finger in. So where you come off of the valve here in your throat, where you start to come around the short side, it must have a 1/2 inch straight up off of the chamber, and then 90 degree out the port window here. It's like a 90 degree sharp edge. It's horrible. As far as flow, it's absolutely horrible. And so when I first looked at these exhausts, I thought, oh, I wonder if this is as horrible as that Ford head, because that's the worst thing I ever seen. This is not as horrible as the Ford head. It's probably 80% as horrible as the Ford head. That Ford thing's the Speedmaster Ford small block head is the worst thing I've ever seen on this short side. And if you have a set of Ford heads, or you happen to be near a set, your buddy's got a set of Ford heads, stick your finger in here and feel this short side on an untouched Speedmaster small block Ford head, and it's horrible. It's the worst thing that I can imagine. I like that you can see the majority of the valve there. You know, that's a good straight shot, so I'm not knocking it 100%, but the very first place I think I would make an improvement is right here in the short side. I would definitely radius it. I wouldn't lower or change the shape of the short side, but I would definitely radius it down there in the pocket. I think that's probably going to be the number one improvement that you can do if you're doing anything to these heads. I think they lowered the floor, because if you look at a lot of small block Chrysler heads, the floor comes down and then right here it kicks up. And it's not a, it's a bad design. I'm not even going to try to dress it up. It's a bad design. But a lot of your small block Chrysler heads, you get right here and then it kicks up. And they look like they took most of that out, which is probably accounting for the huge port. It's not a good idea. The original design where it kicks up is a horrible idea, but just grinding it out and hogging it out, that's not necessarily going to be the best way to go anyhow, because all you do is you end up with a huge port. Most of your flow is coming up the top here on your exhaust, and so by dropping this, all you do is you open up your cross section, you lower your airspeed because you've enlarged the port so much so fast that you're lowering your airspeed into the primary tube of your headers, and that's not necessarily going to translate into good horsepower. You know, your scavenging effect, obviously you want velocity through your header so that you scavenge on your other cylinders, and just jumping to a huge port window so fast out of the port, it's not necessarily a good idea. Valve seals look good while I'm looking at them. Anyhow, so that's that. Here's one other thing. So then they send me this Speedmaster transmission thing, and I'm looking through like, ah, that's cool. They got tons of tranny stuff, you know. And then I get to Chrysler, and right away I'm like, oh, I wonder who they ripped off there. I'm guessing they ripped off Cope. Could be Andrew at A&A. But anyhow, if you're savvy at all on your torque fight stuff, you will see a straight cut pinion. So it looks like they ripped off somebody's. I want to say these are right around 1,050 or 1,100 from Cope. And I bought a lot of John's stuff. I like his stuff. These will be Torrington bearings, and then in order to run those, you have to be machined on the face of your gear here and inside here to accept the Torrington bearings. So, and then even their sun gear here looks straight cut. So here's the thing on straight cut. If you've got a lot of power, if you've got a turbo car, you've got a lot of boost, you're hitting it hard with nitrous, sometimes you want to go to a straight cut planetary gear set. It's a good idea for strength because it doesn't thrust load your planetary set forward or backwards like you would with a helical cut gear, an OE gear. That's great, but that's really a dedicated drag setup and not something to really run on the street. Anyhow, just something I noticed that I was not aware of, and I don't know if that's I don't know what their price point is on it. I guess I'll have to do some more research. So I'm not going to make this any longer than I have to. I'll get this apart. I will get some hard measurements with my calipers. I will test the spring pressures and see what the actual pressure is versus, you know, what they advertise it, and tell you how close or full of BS they are. I'm not against it. I'll tell you what, these are Black Friday. I paid $816 a pair. I bought 2 pairs. I'm not against this head for the money that I spent on it. If I'd have gone out and spent $1,500, you know, I might be a little bit more disappointed. But for the dollars that I'm into the head, so far I'm not too disappointed. My Edelbrocks, I'll tell you what, I spent $2,600 on that pair of Edelbrock Magnum heads. And I bought 2 pairs, so 4 heads total of these Speedmasters for just over $1,600, $1,700 maybe with tax and whatnot. So, are they as good? Probably not, but let's say they're down 20, 30 horsepower. Well, if you saved over $1,000 or something, maybe you can make up that 20, 30 horsepower in a fancy air filter or somebody's, you know, chrome exhaust tip or something. Maybe it's worth your money to buy a cheaper head and not be worried about that 20 horsepower. On the other hand, maybe you're a real serious competitor and you're willing to spend the money and get what you get. Anyhow, I'll follow up with a better vid. Thanks for your time.